Okay. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here again. This is the second webinar we are hosting um, from Detox U, and we are very excited about this topic, which has been very relevant, especially lately. It has been a concerning topic for so long, and I can't remember when I started looking at this as a very important factor first in dysbiosis, in microbiome balance, and then down the road, of course, it was connected to so many other things that are concerning for human health. And unfortunately, everything that we're finding over the years is just making things concerning even more. And so I thought when we're planning which will be the topic of the next webinar, I thought this is just the best topic we can choose right now because it really has an impact in everyone in this world. In the United States, unfortunately, even more than other places because of the big allowance that is created around the usage of glyphosate and now is being pushed even more for various reasons. And that will pose a challenge. And challenge that is not restricted only to us, but the future generations. And this is something that I'm greatly concerned. And I hope that today, with this information up front, we can at least become knowledgeable in order to be more proactive and making better decisions and understanding how we can protect ourselves from these menaces that are part of our daily life, unfortunately, and everywhere. They can be found even if you are conscious and using and choosing the right products and the right foods and the right setting. And even with all those things aligned, we are still getting negatively impacted by this molecule called glyphosate. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and get started. 1 second. Let me see if I can. I always forget what's first, the chicken or the egg. Sharing my screen or, yeah, you are. Okay, Kearney, can you confirm with me you're seeing things properly or
Yes, it looks good.
yeah, looks good? Okay, great. Awesome. So, we're going to talk about glyphosate, but we're also going to cover a little bit of the other herbicides that are being used currently. And there's more, actually, unfortunately. But for the time we have, I was able to put together only the main four that I'm concerned about besides glyphosate, although, again, there's so much into this area of the chemical usage in farming. And we're going to give a little bit of background. Well, my background, hopefully most of you probably know me already. If you met me already in another webinar, but I am a Chilean dentist, an MD, and I specialized in periodontics and oral medicine and surgical implantology. And I transitioned to become a microbiome specialist, and with that expertise in my head, I was able to understand the main disruptive agents for the microbiome, and that led me to the toxicological world, and that's what I'm working on right now on a daily basis, bringing awareness of how impactful are toxins for human health. And because of that, we created a company called Detox U, which it's related to not only support with products detoxification processes inside the body, but also we have a big and great scientific team that works on laboratory testing, etc., things that will come up down the road. I don't want to spoil it right now, but we are way more than just a supplement company, if that's not already a big deal for detoxification support. So we're going to do a little bit of the chemical landscape, and we're going to talk about the health effects of glyphosate, and then these other herbicides as well, and then about the detox system and what we can do for solving this very, very important challenge in the best of our capabilities. So glyphosate has a very interesting story. Honestly, it turned so many times throughout in this invention of glyphosate that really it's just so interesting how it ended up being used in food, where initially, when it was synthesized in Switzerland, the scientist actually created this molecule that found that it was a chelator. And it really didn't pay attention much until it was rediscovered by another company and saw the patent and saw potential in chelation properties. And they were using this for cleaning pipes and softening water, but it was not really that strong. Actually, EDTA has way more potency in terms of chelation than glyphosate. So they actually became a little bit lost, and nobody was paying attention to this molecule until a scientist within Monsanto found out that this chemical, this chelator that he was using for softening the water, was actually killing everything around in terms of plants when it was used. And so it found out that there was an herbicidal component into this molecule, and it was commercially patented as Roundup, which is the name we know it until today. And because it was very potent as an herbicide, of course, it couldn't be used directly into crops. Otherwise, we'll kill everything, crops included. So they found this agrobacterium around that. This is a bacteria that wasn't dying from the effects that glyphosate has for bacterial, because we'll talk about that down the road, but it has antibacterial properties as well. It's an antibiotic, actually. So this bacteria was dying, and they used its genes to modify seeds, and they incorporate this genetic input into those seeds, and they become what we know now as Roundup Ready GMO seeds, and that's how we get Roundup Ready GMO crops. And in 2010, it was patented as an antibiotic because of the strong effect that it has over the shikimate pathways, which was something we're going to talk in a little bit later. And unfortunately, we're finding now more and more concerns in terms of the usage of glyphosate and health issues, including the latest classification as a group 2A from IARC group as a probable carcinogen. Now, as I said before, we start finding now more and more glyphosate traces around all our living environments. And when it was patented, it was a success. It was a hit. Imagine now the farming industry having such a potent herbicide, and now we can do monocrops with a higher level of efficiency. Debatable now, but that was the case at the beginning. And then they start testing, of course, around the places that glyphosate was used, and they start finding glyphosate actually in many places in a cumulative form. It was accumulated, and now, because also there was a certain resistance coming from the crops itself, they start adding more glyphosate to cover that part of resistance, and that's why also they start adding more herbicides in the mix. And now the use explodes 15-fold higher than the initial usage. They start making different types of versions around the world. And now we know that the CDC confirms this actually, that 87% of US children are exposed to glyphosate, and 80% of adults are also exposed to glyphosate on a daily basis. And there has been so much debates because there's been a lot of settlements. Actually, Bayer bought Monsanto, and now they acquired the patent for using this molecule. And there has been many revisions about glyphosate usage and the health concerns that it poses, and we're still debating about those things until now. Now, glyphosate as a chemical, it's actually a glycine and phosphonate molecule bounded together. And both actually glycine being super important in the body, and that's the reason why it has so many detrimental effects in the human biology. And it's very polar, it's water soluble, so it can switch polarity pretty easily. It's a very, very complex molecule to contain because it's not very predictable. It can switch modalities as needed. And the half-life in soil goes from anything between 2 and 197 days, varies. And there's some metabolites we can measure in the environment and in human samples, being the main one, AMPA, but there's a few others that are less important. And we have been detecting glyphosate now in food, but also water, urine, sperm, and breast milk because of its water soluble properties and the amphoteric deuterium bipolarity that has. It can go through everything in the body, even the brain. Now, what is the scale of the problem right now we're dealing with? We're using 4.5 billion pounds of glyphosate in land, in farming. That is massive. And therefore, there's probably no place in the world right now it's not exposed to glyphosate to a certain extent. And there has been a lot of health concerns, a lot of exposure, especially if children exposed to this massively, and a lot of settlements because of the lawsuits from the potential health issues coming from the usage of glyphosate. And we know that this problem doesn't come isolated, that when you combine glyphosate with other herbicides and pesticides, we amplify the toxic effects that glyphosate has up to 70x. It's widely found in many, many foods, vegetable, fruits, legumes, grains, etc. And really, the presence goes from anything from moderate high to very high, depending on where you're looking at. Now, yes, organic prohibits the intentional usage of glyphosate in these type of foods, but the presence of glyphosate, environmental-wise, is so high that it's impossible to prevent the cross-contamination, even from the organic products that we get, with that hope that we're not going to get exposed to glyphosate much. It is a wishful thinking at this point. It does make it better than eating conventional products. Absolutely. Makes total sense. Still would always push that idea to anyone that wants to be at least less exposed to this type of this chemical, but it's not a guarantee that you're not going to get glyphosate in your body. And how this works, how this glyphosate became so harmful for human health, how became so concerning in terms of what can bring into our biology. Well, first and foremost, it works around something called the shikimate pathway. And this, so it blocks an enzyme that we're going to call EPSPS for simplifying my life. I don't want to pronounce that. And probably it will, very unlikely I will be able to. And it's an essential enzyme that is allows certain plants and bacteria to synthesize essential amino acids alongside with other nutrients, other essential nutrients for them. So when they can't, of course, they die because those are essential for their life. The other thing that glyphosate does, and as I said before, not super strongly, but on a very persistent manner, is the mineral chelation. It's actually it's a powerful chelator for some divalent cations like zinc, manganese, iron, cobalt, and copper. And you know how important those are for your red blood cells, for your immune system, etc. This is a big piece of the puzzle, and also bind these minerals from soil. So now your foods are nutrient depleted. And last but not least, it disrupts the cytochrome P450 enzymes, which are critical for detoxification. So not only damages your own biology directly and depletes your nutrients, but also alters the way you can detoxify from these and many other molecules in your body. Now, the TKMA pathway is super important because it is present in many plants, many fungi, and bacteria, and some parasites actually, but it's absent in mammals. And that is the reason why they get away from the potential health concerns initially, because they said, well, we're not going to kill humans by using this molecule because no human has in their cells a TKMA pathway. And that's true, but we need bacteria so much. Everyone that heard me talking about the microbiome already, you know this in a big extent. This is a great piece of our biology, and we can't survive without a healthy microbiome. And so this TKMA pathway allows these organisms to produce phenylalanine, tyrosine, tryptophan, some folates, ubiquinones, vitamin K2, etc. All these things necessary for their life. This pathway, it's present also in gut bacteria, and that is where you get the vulnerability, because that's where you get your microbiome hurt in a big manner, and you lower your capabilities to function properly from that standpoint. Now, there's some bacteria, and we will talk about this a little bit more in detail. There are some bacteria that they don't have this version of the AAP-SPS pathway, and they can actually go around. So that variation allows them to survive the usage and exposure to glyphosate. But unfortunately, the ones that can do this are not the most benign forms of microbes for our own biology. You will see this in a minute. When it comes to chelation, it's a mineral thief. It works and depletes so many essential minerals for our own biological pathways, including calcium, copper for the immune system, calcium for your bones, for your heart, for your nervous system transmission. Cobalt, extremely important for methylation and also for B12 synthesis. Iron, the same thing. Iron is extremely important for oxygen transportation. Zinc, so many enzymes around zinc, especially immune system upregulation, manganese, etc. We have found that in studies that the byproducts, animal byproducts like dairy cows, they have low mineral content in their bodies and also in their milk, and they have and this directly correlated, inversely correlated to the levels of glyphosate in the urine. So as I said before, we're seeing more and more damage coming from these chelation properties that glyphosate has. And now this coming new 2026, there's glyphosate chelation that is happening in bone with very slow release, and that will affect bone marrow, which is one of the reasons why we're seeing all these chronic illnesses around those structures in the rice. And the other thing that does is because it is made out of glycine, it mimics glycine from the body. But it is not real glycine, but it will interact with things that are using glycine as a cofactor or as one of the participant molecules for making certain byproducts in our body. Glutathione, for example, we know that it can replace or displace the actual glycine, and what it will do is it will upregulate GGT, but it will lower the active glutathione available in our cells. Also, it's interacting with glutamate on receptors in the brain. Glycine is an obligate coagonist of those glutamate receptors, and that can lead to an excitatory toxicity in neurons and neurological damage, and of course, neurological degeneration in the future. We're going to look at this a little bit more in detail as well, but definitely has a negative impact in our neurological pathways. The heme synthesis interference, it's because it's impairing the porphyrin ring assembly, so we can't really fix the glycine that gets there, and therefore we have hemoglobin and cytochrome dysfunction because of that, as a result of that. And collagen substitution. This is being still researched, but we know glycine is a very important component of collagen, which is a major component of all the tissues in the body. And because of glyphosate mimicking or acting as glycine, it can actually compromise the connective tissue integrity. This is still being researched, but I think there's unfortunately a lot of probabilities we're going to find positive conclusions about this matter. Now, there's a lot of regulatory divisions when it comes to labeling glyphosate as a hazardous molecule. When we look at what it's concluded from independent agencies like IARC, we can see that they published research showing that the glyphosate is positioned as glyphosate molecule is positioned as a group 2A carcinogenic molecule, which is not the strongest evidence-based classification of a carcinogen, but it's not the weakest either. So it's actually concerning regardless. But the federal organizations like EPA, EFSA, FAO, WHO, those they consider that the glyphosate molecule as safe to use in humans and is unlikely to be a human carcinogen. This is because they're looking at different things. And the IARC evaluates hazard, meaning that can it cause a certain disease. The other ones are looking at more risk, is with the level of exposure we have right now, can be a risk factor for developing this disease. It looks like the same, but it's not. And the other problem is that the independent agencies, they're using public peer-reviewed data, where EPA is using right now the data that is coming from the studies done by the manufacturer. So it's a little bit concerning because there's a probability those are biased in favor of the manufacturer. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think that. Now, we're never exposed to pure glyphosate. You're exposed to a formulation with glyphosate in it, and that amplifies a lot of risk factors from its usage, including POAs that are they will inhibit aromatase, which will lead to potential estrogen increase in the body, and that can be also a concern for carcinogenesis and other endocrine disruptive problems. The concentration that we get and the level of disruption we get when we compound multiple molecules in this one product that we call Roundup commercially, it amplifies the negative effects by a lot. So it becomes more toxic, and also we don't have safety testings on all these things combined. The testings are done on a single molecule basis. So that's another piece of concern, because we don't know if we blend these things, how bigger the problem becomes when they're compounded compared to being isolated in their usage. I said this before, so it's redundant. So the health effects of glyphosate, of course, they come from all these different venues that are already explained in terms of the biological mimicry that is created because of the molecule nature, but also all the pathways that are interacting with this molecule and the nutrients that are getting dragged and chelated out of the body because of these ionic biological properties. One of the main consequences of getting exposed to glyphosate is by far the microbiome disruption. 54% of the human gut bacteria, it's intrinsically sensitive to glyphosate. And again, this gives us a huge concern on these bacteria being killed, and what is the replacement plan? Meaning, what can start thriving due to this gap created by this massive killing as an opportunistic condition. And unfortunately, what we have seen in human microbiome samples is that the ones that are resistant, sort of the 29% label there, they're pretty inflammatory for humans. So when we have very important keystone species like Faecalibacterium promnitzi and Bifidobacterium species like Bifidobacterium longum and Adolescentis and Lactobacillus species and Citrobacter, Propionibacterium, all of them protecting the immune system, working around the production of short-chain fatty acids, making all these pathways for immune modulation. All of those bacteria are getting killed, and on the other side, we're making other bacteria that are resistant to the EPS-PS pathway thrive. Who are they? Clostridium, Salmonella, Enterococcus faecalis, Staphylococcus, Ruminococcus duria, which are all associated with inflammatory conditions and even foodborne pathogenic illnesses that are not good for us, of course. And that is one of the biggest concerns. Not only we're killing microbes in the gut, but we're also selectively favoring the ones that we don't want to have in the gut in large amounts. So again, there's going to be a dysbiotic state. And this dysbiotic state happens even below what is considered safe by the EPA in terms of a human exposure to glyphosate. So we're not really, it doesn't need to be a high amount of glyphosate. Actually, there's a monoclonal issue with the dosage in glyphosate that I will cover in a minute. But the most important part here is that we don't need high levels of glyphosate to create dysbiosis. We need just what is supposed to be safe for humans to see these changes in the microbiome composition, drop in Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus, in the production of short-chain fatty acids, in the increase in the fecal pH, which is telling us that the fermentation is not occurring in the right way, and all the other inflammatory markers from the immune side, all of them elevated due to this dysbiotic state. And we have experimental validations of these models. Actually, they're pretty novel, where we see that animals exposed to glyphosate because of the alterations in the microbiome patterns and the lowering and short-chain fatty acids and neurotransmitter production, it creates neurocognitive and behavioral changes in mice after being exposed to normal, quote unquote, normal amounts of glyphosate for 16 weeks. And these alterations are actually related in a lot of ways with the symptoms we're associating all these trending conditions like ADHD and spectrum disorders and Parkinson's disease and dementia and depression and anxiety. So at least it's a possible connection that we need to look deeper. As I said before, this also will lead not only killing bacteria and making other not so healthy groups thrive because of that, but also leaky gut, intestinal permeability, which also directly affects the efficiency of detoxification in the body. And again, inflammation in the gut and all over the body due to these imbalances. In the gut-brain axis, we're going to see damage on the serotonin production, GABA. So all the calming neurotransmitters are dropped to very low levels. Again, the inflammation created by the exposure to glyphosate also can activate microglia in the brain, creating neuroinflammation, which is associated, of course, with many cognitive disorders, vagus nerve imbalances, and there's a potential autism link through some studies done that where you see alterations in the microbiome leading to the autistic related disorders. This is a great picture. I think I showed this in the last webinar. Glyphosate coming and altering the CKMA pathway, and then altering, of course, the production of of neurotransmitters, dropping the levels of serotonin and dopamine, and then all these different behavioral alterations we're seeing in animal models. Which again, they mimic all these different conditions we're seeing on the rise. Now, beyond that, Parkinson's disease, there's a lot of concern about not only the oxidative stress created by glyphosate, but also the damage to the neurons themselves and the link that this can have with exposure to glyphosate in Parkinson's disease. Cognitive decline, also another study showing that the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, it gets reduced in animals that were exposed to glyphosate, and therefore the cognitive function declines with that. And the other one that I just mentioned before is the glutamate excitotoxicity that we see because of the alteration on the MDA and MMDA receptor because of the glycine mimicry that we have from glyphosate. And this is unfortunately a picture of the world we're living at, where we have so many of these molecules, not only glyphosate, but atrazine, chlorpyrifos, and permethrin, and so on and so forth, which they're altering not only the gut, but also the communication between the gut and the brain, and then disrupting all these elements that are barriers to keeping things working properly and the functionality of our organs, which leads to all these different conditions. Now, on the side of oxidative stress and genotoxicity, also we have seen some correlation between these molecules and the potential damage that is created at the DNA level. There's a formation of reactive oxygen species that is seen because of the drop in glutathione production that I just mentioned. Also, there's an NRF2 downregulation created by the exposure to glyphosate, and that leads to an increase of lipid peroxidation and carbonylation of proteins as well. And that, alongside with direct DNA damage in all these forms that are listed here, we can create these alterations at the genomic level that are also recognized as risk factor for many of the chronic illnesses we're associated with the exposure to glyphosate, including, of course, the carcinogenic part of that. On the endocrine system, which is another important piece of the puzzle, endocrine system, it's unfortunately affected because of the aromatase interference that I mentioned before. We know that there's some elements that they have been checking on studies in terms of the production of hormones and how glyphosate can interfere the proper modulation of the hormonal balance inside the body. And that, of course, affects all our communication pathways, because at the end of the day, hormones are very important communication systems. And that can lead, again, to increased risk factors for certain types of cancer. Now, the other problem is that the exposure to glyphosate, the lower it gets, we have this, what I was calling the non-monotonic response. What is this? The typical traditional toxicological quote will be, the higher the dose, the higher the toxicity. In this case, it's actually the opposite. Why? Because in the low-grade exposure, the body doesn't mount responses around that toxicant, and therefore it creates a bigger interference and damage with these biological pathways. So if the response will be, or the exposure will be larger, the body will respond accordingly. But at this level, it's able to create damage, but the body doesn't see that damage coming. And that it makes it way worse than, of course, a traditional toxin. And that is the same case for microplastics. So and plasticides, especially BPA, we talk about hormonal disruption and BPA, and the minimum amounts needed to create that disruption is because of the same reason. Now, you need only 0.1 part per billion of glyphosate to disrupt hormonal signaling in breast cancer cell lines. This is a study done in 2013. There's a 37%, which is incredibly significant, of elevated aromatase activity, which leads to estrogen synthesis in human placental cells at low dosages. Not even, again, super high exposure, just very low dosage. Thyroid, also, it's disrupted. Glyphosate has the ability to disrupt the T3 and T4 synthesis, and therefore, of course, influencing metabolism and development. Now, beyond that, there's many other associated diseases we have seen with the exposure of glyphosate in certain communities, and shown in research done by different scientists. There's a potential risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma with high exposure that have seen in some meta-analysis done up to 41% increase. Again, some independent agencies are considering glyphosate as a 2A carcinogen, and there's so many claims coming from people that they claim to be affected health-wise by the exposure to glyphosate. And there has been a tremendous amount of settlements, which poses the question, is that there's a certain agreement, a contractual agreement, that the glyphosate can create these type of diseases and conditions. Now, this is more of the same. The other thing is these the non-alcoholic fatty liver conditions that we're seeing on the rise. There's an increased prevalence of non-alcoholic fatty liver um, of 50% increase in the last 3 decades. And when we overlap the curves of the prevalence of non-alcoholic fatty liver and the herbicide use in the same time frame, we see that there's an increase of 280% usage of herbicide that aligns with also the increase in the prevalence of these conditions. So again, when we look at this alignment, of course, we have this question on the table. Is this the direct result of the exposure to glyphosate that explains why we're seeing this damage at the organ level functionality? And there has been some human and in vitro and animal studies showing liver inflammation, oxidative responses, that are also aligned with the dysbiotic state created by glyphosate, and lipid peroxidation, adipocytes, genomic instability, apoptosis in hepatocytes, etc. So we see all these markers that they can be associated with, of course, the health status of the liver, and in studies where we analyze the exposure to glyphosate and the status of these organs. Kidney-wise, we do have also an alteration in the kidney performance. The glyphosate, by inhibiting glycine metabolism, also can shift the pathways in the kidneys towards oxalate accumulation, and leading that to kidney stone risk factors. But there's also some mitochondrial damage that will damage and create problems in the organs across the board. So they won't be related to just one specific organ. It's really across the board, any organ that can get damaged by these alterations on the mitochondrial performance. So this is a summary of all the things I've been mentioning. And unfortunately, there's more when we see certain risk factors because of the massive exposure we see when we test for glyphosate in children's urine. And this is coming from the CDC NATS report on the 2022. 87% of the urine of children was tested positive for glyphosate. And children are eating way more frequently than usually adults. So they're getting more frequently exposed to this glyphosate that unfortunately is incorporated in our foods. And that also can create damage in the CYP system, which in immature organs, it's a big deal because we don't have a full form organ at that time of our lives, and we rely highly on our detoxification pathways to protect ourselves. And so that is another factor. And the prenatal and also early postnatal windows are very sensitive because of the gut-brain connection, the hormonal changes that are occurring at a fast pace at that time, and all the colonization that is happening at the microbiome level. We have a growing and developing microbiome at that stage that will get disrupted if it's early exposed to glyphosate. So how we are doing in time? 40 minutes. Okay, not bad. So summarizing, we have this shikimate blocking system that creates dysbiosis, alters nutrient production from a microbiome standpoint, kills bacteria, favoring pathological pro-inflammatory bacteria in the gut, also depletes and lowers the availability of very important minerals in the body, which alters enzymatic function at the very least, and many other things. We have this glycine mimicry that creates defective glutathione, activates neurons in an excessive way, toxicological wise, and alters oxygen transportation, etc., hijacking everything that the body needs to be healthy. Also, we increase oxidative stress, lowered the performance of the NRF2 system, and we have a mitochondrial dysfunction related to that. Also, our hormonal system gets disrupted, endocrine disruption happening with this non-monotonic response in the mix, which is highly concerning because it's not dose dependent. And then genotoxicity, altering DNA, and also increasing oxidative stress on the site, which leads to genomic alterations down the road. I think that's a lot to be worried about. Now we have also other ones, and I will just mention them briefly, but we have paraquat, also used in the United States, has been banned in 32 countries. It's still legal in the United States. Has been proven to be doubling the risk for Parkinson's. There's no antidote for this, and it's lethal in even tiny oral dosages. So we're using a poison that it's not good at all for human health and is banned everywhere else. We still use it here. Atrazine is highly common in water, also labeled as a group 2A carcinogen, and creates chemical castration. In animal studies, it actually lowers the hormonal production to the point that it creates it makes the animals sterile. Period. You can't reproduce anymore. 80 million Americans drink it daily. 2,4-D. I heard about this so many years ago. This is part of the Agent Orange. This was used in Vietnam. And now we thought this is going to be a good idea to add it in our mix and it's the second most used herbicide. Actually, that was the reinforcement that Monsanto, I remember it was Monsanto at that time, or Bayer, brought into the equation when glyphosate was not strong enough. Because, again, biology has its ways, and was creating resistance. So over resistance, they start making more and more aggressive forms of Roundup. And in that mix, they start adding more herbicides in combination with glyphosate to go around the resistance that was created by some plants and bacteria that were able to, genetically speaking, adapt to the glyphosate damage. And dicamba is a next generation GMO herbicide. It's volatile, and it has a range of action that is massive compared to glyphosate. And there's a lot of links now emerging about the liver toxicity and immune disruption that poses. I will skip the details, but as you can see, this is a highlight of what I just mentioned. 1 teaspoon can be lethal for humans of paraquat. It's banned in 32 countries. Still use it here. Atrazine, same thing I just mentioned. The 2,4-D. I mean, we saw what happened with the offsprings in Vietnam exposed to Agent Orange. Nothing good could come from this exposure. And dicamba. So when we get this combination, toxicity from glyphosate becomes 70 times greater than the baseline toxicity from just glyphosate. And there's 0 studies done in this the safety of the mix of all these herbicides used in combination. And we're getting this in a cumulative way because it's coming from so many sources. And being glyphosate, a water-soluble molecule, goes everywhere. So it's impossible to contain. Lipid-soluble toxins are easier to contain. But water-soluble molecules, we are made of water in a big amount. And everything we live around and we interact with, it's water dependent. So it's literally everywhere. Now, thank God we have a detox system. And this is where our body, even though it will get challenged, by the exposure to all these molecules. It still can do a good deal of support to take care of this exposure and damage and protect ourselves. So as you know, and as I've been mentioning many times, we have this three-phase system that works around the elimination of toxins that are getting in our body. And unfortunately, this system depends in portion of it of glycine. And that's the biggest tricky part of glyphosate, because glyphosate will interact with our own detoxification system in a negative way. That's why reinforcing and optimizing our detoxification system is so important. And again, on phase 1, glyphosate inhibits CYP enzymes. On phase 2, all the reactive oxygen species created will consume the glutathione we're making faster. Glutathione is there protecting the system, so all these initial molecules created on phase 1, they don't interact or they don't create damage with our own body's tissues until they get conjugated. Glutathione is huge for that part. But if we're using glutathione too much because we have all this extra amount of reactive oxygen species coming from the exposure from glyphosate, then we're overwhelming this pathway a lot. And also, of course, as you know, that we will increase the enzyme related to the production of glutathione, but the end result is a very deficient glutathione production because of the interaction of glycine coming from, or the glycine part coming from glyphosate with this glutathione production system. And then the enterohepatic recycling. As I mentioned before, glyphosate produces leaky gut and also creates dysbiosis. And all these also bacteria that are interacting with glucuronidated molecules, that we call them the strobolome, but they're the bacteria that they produce beta-glucuronidase. They can reactivate the toxins. Not only we have more recirculating toxins from the leaky gut component, but also bacteria now becoming dysbiotic. They can reactivate toxins and send them back to the circulation, and we have to deal with them once more, which of course overwhelms our detoxification system even more. And we can see this in so many aspects of your health: brain fog, fatigue, chemical sensitivities, night sweats, which are, I'm not talking about the normal sweat you get at night, especially on a hot night, I'm talking about being completely wet in the middle of the night, because the body flushing all these toxins as much as possible. Skin issues, digestive problems, joint aches, muscle pain, hormonal imbalances, mood disruption, so on and so forth. And there's many ways we can test glyphosate in the body. There's other testings we can do on the side, like liver panels or mineral panels and hormonal panels, which are directly associated with exposure to glyphosate. We can measure also glutathione and see if that's getting disrupted. Or organic acid test can give us some also markers in terms of mitochondrial dysfunction, which is highly related to the exposure to glyphosate. The most direct measuring of glyphosate, of course, is urinary glyphosate. So, final part, solutions. So, first and foremost, take care of your food. Even though there's no perfect food nowadays, there's better foods and there's worse foods, and we can choose. Look at what the dirty dozen priority. Look at the foods that are mostly commonly sprayed with glyphosate. Usually berries and grains are highly exposed, and wheat especially tremendously exposed to glyphosate. But honestly, there's only a few things that are saved from the exposure to glyphosate directly. So make decisions around looking for cleaner versions of any food you eat. And again, read the label. If it's processed, highly likely also has a ton of glyphosate in it. Water filtration, water supply right now is highly contaminated with glyphosate. So filtrating the water makes sense. We can't rely on Brita, on just the regular carbon, activated carbon filters, because this molecule is, as I said before, very sneaky. We need reverse osmosis. It's the only guarantee that we're going to clear glyphosate out of the water. Don't use Roundup in your garden. And if your neighbor is using Roundup, ask him, her, can you please switch to something else? It's hard, I know. When I was living in New Jersey, probably I was the only weirdo that was not using Roundup in the entire neighborhood. Everyone else was. And no wonder why I test myself and I was so exposed to glyphosate. But at least try. And of course, directly don't use glyphosate. Besides, when it's used in the farming industry, because we're trying to be cost effective there, because they're spraying so many acres of land, they use just enough, the minimum amount to take care of things. But in the backyard, the person will come and spray the whole bottle because it doesn't make much difference budget wise. So the level of usage in a single home basis compared to the farming industry is usually exponentially higher. And again, try to not use anything else that can synergize toxicity from other sources, including cookware, the things you're using for storing your foods. And from a clothing perspective, organic cotton, also it's a good choice. It's a better choice. Your diet, glycine is incredibly important to bring back into your biology, because we know it's going to get exchanged and displaced by glyphosate. So bone broth and everything that is collagen rich will help you bringing back that glycine. Cruciferous vegetables, for sure, great for activating NRF2 pathways, donating sulfur molecules. Sulforaphane is great for upregulating detoxification genes in phase 1 and phase 2. So be mindful about those, incorporate them in your diet in a frequent basis. Same with fibers, so important to feed your beneficial bacteria. So if you want to have a fighting chance of keeping those guys alive, then you need to feed them accordingly. Sauna therapy can help pushing any toxin out of your body. So that's another thing I typically recommend across the board, not for glyphosate only, but for so many other things. Actually, for heavy metals, saunas are proven to be very effective in reducing the toxic burden from mercury, for example. Exercise, move. Your lymphatic system doesn't have muscle layers. You need to move your muscles in order to mobilize your lymph. Otherwise, it's going to become stagnant. Stagnation is equal to toxicity. Please take care of that. And all of you are mindful about this, but just don't forget about that. And your sleep, your lymph system, your lymphatic system. You need to clear the toxins. You can't clear toxins if you're not sleeping well. It's just impossible. Sleep early, as early as possible. Have your last meal of the day as early as possible. I promise you it's going to pay off. So many people I saw when I was practicing that came with acid reflux. They were eating 1 hour before going to bed, and heavy meals. Eat light. The expression, eat like a peasant at dinner. Eat like a king in the morning, but not in the evening. In the evening, very light meals. Probiotics, always supporting your microbiome makes sense. I love especially spore-based probiotics. I am part of the medical advisory board for Microbiome Labs. I've been working with them, but there's good support coming from spores like Bacillus subtilis and many others, coagulants. They can help your gut integrity, your gut balance, your LPS load, your short-chain fatty acid production, all the things I mentioned that they get disrupted by the presence of glyphosate. And then our system. And our system makes sense because it will cover every aspect that I mentioned already that gets affected by the exposure to all the toxins in the mix, but including glyphosate. Why? Because our remover activates phase 1 and phase 2 detox pathways, works directly in the hepatocyte, and improves the functionality of all the receptors and pathways within the hepatocyte. It will boost the production of glutathione, but also it will help replenishing the limiting rate factors for making your glutathione and brings also glutathione directly in a reduced form. It will upregulate NRF2 pathways, and it will upregulate everything receptor-wise for flushing toxins more efficiently. And then you get your safety net, the binder. So anything that's going out needs to be bounded. And if it's in order to prevent enterohepatic recirculation. Otherwise, it's a 50-50 nowadays. Yes, the system was great a century ago. Today, it's very likely that any toxin can get recirculated within our body. So supporting the elimination part with minerals that combine these toxins and create this super large molecule that can't escape the elimination routes and can't go back to the systemic circulation and go back to the liver and repeat the process once more, it's a good idea. And that's why we're supporting that through the bile pathways and grabbing those toxins in a very efficient manner. Plus the fact that we're bringing replenishing elements for the mineral depletion in forms of shilajit, in forms of molybdenum, which is a great cofactor for sulfation. And we have a focus product that I love. This is an amazing, it's such a well-rounded formula. It's called Industrial Focus. Industrial Focus was made with glyphosate in mind. So what we did was putting together this general detox bundle, which I already spoke about. Give me 1 second. Here. So the Industrial Focus, what it does is brings NAC. And that's a donating molecule of cysteine, which is the limiting rate amino acid for producing glutathione, which is, as you know, a tripeptide that includes glutamine, glycine, and cysteine. It will also support, has black kale in it, sulfur pathways, sulfation pathways, and also will activate NRF2 pathways. It also supports the lung mucosa. Why? Because glyphosate is in the air humidity and many other toxins. You want your lungs to be protected. So we added things like yerba santa, which is a mucin stimulant. So this mucin layer will grab toxins and excrete them out of the lungs without preventing them to get incorporated on a systemic level and get inside your body. So we have so much support with this product called Industrial Focus for your respiratory system, also for your vascular system. We added ginger because this is a very important barrier, your stomach, and also it's a great circulatory support, which is incredibly important, especially when we have alterations coming from glyphosate and the heme molecules and the oxygen transportation pathways. So as I said before, this is all protected with this system Rootin, which also is greatly supportive for your vascular integrity and oxidative endothelial stress. Feverfew as a great anti-inflammatory botanical and gervasanta, I mentioned that for your respiratory detox. And then on the glutathione part, we have NAC, which bundles with the already added reduced glutathione of the remover. We added glycine. Of course, we're going to add glycine because glyphosate was in my mind when I put together this product. We have black kale for sulforaphane donation, and that upregulates all these hundreds of enzymes around the detoxification pathways. Artichoke to stimulate your bile, which will balance your microbiome and keep out these potentially pathogenic bacteria that we want to control. But also, it's a very important piece of the puzzle that also helps pushing toxins out. And the conjugated toxins can leave the body now in a better form, in a more supported form. So this is what I wanted to show you today. This is the concerning part that I wanted to bring to your attention coming from glyphosate. Today, we have a full-blown approval in using glyphosate with no concerns whatsoever in terms of the regulatory agencies. And of course, when we look at the evidence and the scientific research behind the biological interactions of glyphosate and our biology, it's not really a peace of mind for anyone. So that's something we have to keep in mind when we're looking at any test, any labs, or making any decisions for improving our health. It is widely thrown in our environment. Everyone is getting exposed to in certain amounts. 87% of your children, of the children in the United States, exposed to this. There's a multi-system harm. There's a synergy with other chemicals. So this is one out of many that we're getting exposed to on a daily basis. And for taking care of this, the only proactive, effective way will be supporting your detoxification pathways and your barriers and membranes in the best way possible. Of course, replenishing nutrients that are lost by the exposure to glyphosate. So that's where Detox U industrial focus comes into the game to support every single element we just mentioned. So start checking your diet, filter your water, start your industrial focus bundle, give it at least a 90-day full run, and ideally 6 months. That's the ideal time frame, at least 90 days. Test when possible. And we know this is not a plant killer. It's a biological killer. And with this in mind, let's start the questions. Let me stop the.
I'll also very quickly go over different ways to work with us if you guys are interested, and then I'll give you some time to type your questions in the Q&A. So I'm Courtney Gaderos. I'm part of a sales team here at Detox U. Really quickly, just if you're interested in implementing Detox U into your practice, there's a couple ways that you can do that. So we have a wholesale program that is going to be a better fit if you really want to order supplements, hold them in your practice, and then dispense straight to your patients. And then we also have an affiliate program. So we call that our practitioner partner program. This is way more hands-off. You don't have to hold stock. You don't have to fulfill orders. You'll just send your customized link to your patient, and then they will shop through that link, and you'll earn commission on those sales. So those are the two ways. We'll follow up with an email. We'll get you those links. I'll see if I can also throw them in the Q&A here. But you can find those links also on our website. You'll just use the For Practitioners tab up at the top. But then we can just go ahead and get into the Q&A. I see a couple of questions coming in here. If I was exposed to glyphosate years ago, can industrial focus heal damage done in the past?
That's a good question. Actually, glyphosate works mostly on a daily basis. So the half-life of glyphosate inside the body, because of the water-soluble properties that has, it's very short. So it's just this ongoing, lingering, low-grade exposure that creates damage. Now, to your question, you have to work still because of the potential glutathione depletion and the damage on the membranes and barriers internally in three big elements, three main pillars. Your microbiome probably still not in great shape because of that damage. The second part will be your nutrients, especially replenishing to get reservoirs, which is not something that most people take care of. A lot of people, they try to get just enough to go through the day. You want to have optimal levels, and that is a completely different game. And that's something I usually highlight when it comes to optimization. I'm all about optimization. Third, because of the potential overwhelming factors that are brought by glyphosate exposure, there's potential lingering damage on the organs related to detoxification. And that's where the Detox EU protocol excels. That's where you get these protective and at the same time supportive botanicals to not only take care of the toxins that you might be getting exposed to today or that you were exposed to before, but also rebuilding the structures, giving the organs a fighting chance to heal, properly heal. Because regardless of the specific exposure, everyone's getting exposed to toxins every day. And with that massive amount of exposure we get from the environment, we give little room to your organs to actually repair. They're literally just barely making it throughout the entire day. And then they have to start over and over the process of elimination of toxins, which is endless. So supporting reduction of toxins allows the organs to have this room for healing. That's probably the best benefit from previous exposure. But again, keep in mind, previous is not really previous completely, because everyone in this world is getting exposed to hundreds of toxins on a daily basis.
How do you ensure patient compliance with detox protocols?
Well, the simplicity of the protocol actually helps a lot. So the dosage is the same for each product, 2 capsules of each uh, uh, twice daily, uh, taken all together. You don't have to time the binder separately, like most protocols request. We added the time release capsule that solves that problem. So you take all the products all together, at least 1 hour away from meals, twice daily. It's not really a complex guideline to follow. And the simplicity in terms of the amount of products that we need to take care of things is also a great plus. Most protocols, they require so many products to be taken all together to get things done. We did a huge effort from the scientific research and development to be able to put all these ingredients in just a few products. So the basic product line is just only 2 bottles and 4 capsules twice daily to get things done. And if you bring this to the next level with the industrial focus or any other focus product, it's only 2 capsules more you add into your regimen. And again, that adds another layer of support for detoxification purposes. But we're not asking more than 6 capsules twice daily in the most complex scenario to become supported in all the areas that you need to protect yourself from all these damaging molecules.
Yeah, I think our subscription model is great for compliance as well, because if you're
Yeah.
like me, you're ordering at the last minute and there's gaps here and there.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. That's another thing that you get as a benefit. That you get not only the free shipping part that I love, but the subscription. Subscription is a peace of mind because me included, I will forget. And
Hmm.
then you lose the continuance of the protocol, which is super important to keep things moving in the right direction.
Can you do a Biome FX protocol from Microbiome Labs at the same time you are doing this protocol?
Yes, absolutely. So remember that BiomeFX checks for genomic analysis, and that is pretty stable from the analytical standpoint. So it won't be disrupted by this protocol at all. You will see a clearer picture of your microbiome regardless.
Can patients use their HSA to purchase Detox U products?
No, they can't. As far as I know, no, they
That's a
can't.
good idea, though. We should maybe think about that.
I would love to. Yeah, right now, no. It's not part of the things that we can offer. But we'll look into this. I can promise, but we'll give it
Yeah.
a
I mean, if you can buy an Aura ring, you can hopefully.
yes. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. We'll look into that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Are products only available through practitioners?
No, they're not. Um, these are botanical based products. I don't see the need of restricting from the access part. But I always recommend to go through a practitioner to use these products if possible. I don't want anyone to not be able to take care of their health and protect themselves from the toxicological exposures because they might be a little bit financially challenged to afford the services of a practitioner in from this area. It's not typically insurance covered, but this is really the main reason why we offer this directly to consumers. But it's always in my mind that the best way to take care of things, ideally, would be through the guidance of a knowledgeable practitioner that will check your symptoms, evaluate responses, and adjust things accordingly.
Let's see. How do you avoid mobilizing toxins faster than the body can eliminate them?
When you move the gears at the same speed and in a comprehensive manner? So that's a great question. And I've been talking about this quite a few times. So when you are narrow sighted in the approach, you can speed up a certain part of the process, and that wheel spin in X amount of cycles. And then maybe the next phase is not catching up. And that will create a stressing element to the next phase. That makes the system collapse. But when you know your system and you work with every single receptor and every phase of the equation, then you're mobilizing things from point A to point B with the same speed. Many people suffer hurt reactions because of this narrow-sighted approach that I've seen from other sources. That is exactly why we went so comprehensive in the support that was created in the Detox U products. Um, that's the whole plan, that you are upregulating the CYP system. At the same time, you're supporting the enzymes in the conjugation phase. And at the same time, you're mobilizing things out with the binder in the duodenum level, in the intestinal level, so you don't recycle them back to your body. That's when you take care of all these elements all together, then the process goes very smoothly. And actually, you lower the occurrence of side effects, which is actually the case we have been seeing all the time with the feedback we get from people who are using our products, that they don't really get any side effects whatsoever. The biggest complaint usually is improvement or like more frequency in their bowel movements, which is not really a terrible thing due to the overwhelming cases of constipation. And it's not like an urgency issue. It's just, oh, they feel like things are moving better, which I believe is a good sign at the end of the day.
Are there any binders that work better in glyphosate elimination?
Yes, but this is the problem. The problem is that glyphosate is, by definition, a water-soluble organophosphate. So the water-soluble dual ionic structure that the molecule has makes it very complex to be captured by binders traditionally. So bile capturing um, uh, uh, um, binders, they can improve the elimination, but the best chance you have is actually through the urinary excretion. And that's why you have in the remover formula dandelion and goldenrod, because those are mild diuretics that they prevent mineral loss, but they will flush through the urine all these water-soluble molecules, including, I would say, one of the most important ones, glyphosate. And at the same time, they're protecting because of the antioxidant support that we bring with other ingredients. They're protecting your nephrons, your main structure for filtration in your kidneys. So at the same time, we're pushing things to be eliminated faster. We're protecting these structures to not get compromised through this process.
Great. That was our last question. So is there anything you want to add or?
No, I really appreciate everyone for being here. I love these opportunities to share more information about what we're doing and also how you can become proactive. Remember, the world we live in today is not the world that we had 100 years ago or 80 years ago. And as I said many times, the kids are born today, or they were born only 20 years ago. They've never had a single day without being exposed to toxins. So what we're being mindful and what we're learning today is not only for us, it's for protecting anyone we care and love in our lives, and taking action always based off for future health. Not all these things are going to create symptoms today, but the cumulative factors, the overlap of damage will can be a really big risk factor for developing very serious illnesses in the future. We're taking care of things now to be able to enjoy our lives all the years that we're allowed to be in this planet. So that's the plan, to support our bodies today for not only today's benefits, but to enjoy our lives, or hopefully for a long time. If you need anything from us, you have our email, support@detoxu.com, our website, detoxu.com. We will send you this information to your emails, and you will get a recording of this webinar along with the slides. And if you need anything else, please let us know. We're hearing your questions, and we're here to support you in your journey and anything that we can. Thank you so much for being here. Till the next time.